Elon Musk once made a bold claim that no one takes him for his word. This was immediately followed by him saying that in 2 decades he wants his space company to perform 1,000 launches in a year. This is good leverage for another Starship orbital attempt this year. In the 1.5-hour-long hearing this week, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz has put pressure on the FAA and the other regulatory agencies, such as the Fish and Wildlife Services, for delaying the SpaceX Starship launches and tests. Stay tuned as we get into this, and we're covering all of this and more in today's episode of
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of my channel.
Senator Cruz used his opening statements to express pride that Texas is at the forefront of American leadership in space, noting NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston and companies like SpaceX, which he visited back in August. But Cruz strongly expressed opposition to the review needed for Starship's second launch, calling the FAA's task of ensuring corrective measures have been carried out an entirely duplicative environmental review. When asked by Senator Cruz about the timeline for the HLS version of Starship, William Jersten Mayer, SpaceX's vice president for build and reliability, said it was hard to pin that down. Jersten Mayer said, "We should be the ones that are driving the development, and I'm still reading the same fucking thing." Noting that SpaceX has been ready for a month to launch the next Starship test flight. Licensing, including environmental approval, often takes longer than rocket development. This should never happen, and it's only getting worse. Unnecessary bureaucracy that has nothing to do with public safety. SpaceX, for its part, has frequently said explosions of its rockets are welcome in the early stages of development, claiming it helps innovate design much quicker than ground testing. Jersten Mayer did acknowledge that in addition to regulatory hurdles, SpaceX continues to face technological challenges with Starship development. It's still not clear whether SpaceX can meet NASA's goal of having Starship ready for a lunar landing by late 2025. "We've got a lot of challenges in front of us to meet the requirements that we receive from NASA," he said in brief remarks after the hearing. "The only way we can get there is by flying," Jersten Mayer said. He added that SpaceX has had a hard time allocating resources, a bit uncertainty about when the launch license will arrive. "We have people work extra shifts. We got the vehicle ready, then we couldn't fly," Jersten Mayer said, adding that SpaceX will likely carry out more ground tests such as a wet dress rehearsal as it awaits the license, but that regulatory uncertainty prevents them from establishing a more productive schedule. In response to this, the FAA said it is working diligently to attract, hire, and retain additional staff. A notable statement issued Wednesday evening, Deputy NASA Administrator Pam Melroy said properly funding the federal agencies that regulate launches is essential to NASA's goals. As global interest and capabilities in space exploration continue to expand at a rapid rate, America must continue to lead in human exploration with the return to the Moon under Artemis and the first human mission to Mars to search for life farther in the solar system. Melroy said, "To be successful in achieving NASA's goals, it's important our regulatory partners have the resources they need to carry out their oversight duties and keep pace with commercial industry progress." Alongside SpaceX at the hearing were representatives from 2 other commercial space companies, Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, both of which send wealthy tourists to the edge of space on suborbital rockets. In a remarkable display of unity on a day of deep divisions elsewhere on Capitol Hill, all witnesses and the subcommittee members that spoke Wednesday were in agreement that the regulatory framework facing commercial space companies needs change and warned against rulemaking that could hamper progress. Karen Shinwork, the president of CS Consulting and a former employee of both SpaceX and Relativity Space, told the subcommittee that current FAA regulations do in fact protect crew members as part of the vehicle's flight safety team, and passengers have protections via their training and acceptance of risk. Given the limited number of private human space flights, 3 orbital and 10 suborbital, the ongoing opportunities for thoughtful engagement between the FAA and industry, as well as the FAA's challenges with implementing its existing regulations. The original premise underpinning the learning period still appears solid. Despite it being the focus of much of Wednesday's hearing, the FAA wasn't invited to participate in the discussion. The FAA did not receive an invitation to testify at the hearing. An FAA spokesperson said in a statement to Spaceflight Now, In his comments to the subcommittee, Phil Joyce, Blue Origin's senior vice president of the New Shepard business unit, offered 3 points of suggestion to modify the FAA's regulation over the commercial space sector. Number 1. Create a more streamlined process to keep pace with industry. Number 2. Have Congress grant the FAA sufficient resources to keep up with licensing. And number 3. Allow the FAA more time to make needed adjustments by extending the learning period. Beyond the FAA, Congress should think broadly about how to build a framework for mission authorization. This should be correctly scoped and draw clear boundaries between agencies. We also recommend Congress designate a single agency as the hub for authorization of commercial space activity. Suresh Bandla, Virgin Galactic's Vice President of Government Affairs and Research, said an extension of at least 8 years would be their recommendation. And I completely agree, we should not be moving the goalpost just to move the goalpost. But now is the time, because we have data, we have operators to discuss what that framework looks like. That's the important part. The learning period should not lapse without having a blueprint for what a safety framework looks like for human space flights, so that we can look at what areas need to be regulated. What are the consequences of that? Making sure it's still light touch to allow innovation, and also importantly that the FAA is resourced with the funds and the expertise to carry out that framework. The top Republican on the subcommittee, Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, and its chair, Kirsten Sinema, an independent from Arizona, both agreed the moratorium should be extended. They each also acknowledged that existing regulations, such as those that outline the process for obtaining human spaceflight launch licenses as well as satellite licenses, need to be improved. In the end, we hope that the FAA will let Starship have another go at an orbital test flight this year. Let's talk another Elon Musk ambition. Words tend to coincide with his actions. He's now indeed living the dream that he once dreamt and is fast-tracked at hitting that seemingly insurmountable 1,000 launches a year milestone. And the assurance I have in this statement came yesterday when SpaceX had a glorious show of 2 successful launches in approximately 14 hours. But more impressively, this milestone marked the 200th orbital-class rocket recovery to date. Dreams really do come true. SpaceX launched 72 small satellites to orbit on Monday, June 12, and landed the returning rocket back on Earth, marking the 200th touchdown in the company's history. A broomstick lifted off from California's Vandenberg Space Force Base at 5:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, kicking off a rideshare mission called Transporter 8. The rocket's first stage came back to Earth for a vertical touchdown at Vandenberg, a little less than 8 minutes after liftoff as planned. It was the 9th launch and landing for this particular booster. SpaceX wrote in a mission description. What's more exciting is that it was the 200th booster landing that SpaceX has pulled off during an orbital mission to date. That tally began in December of 2015, and Elon Musk's company has made such touchdowns pretty much routine in the 7.5 years since. SpaceX celebrated the achievement with an inspirational video on Twitter. This result continues to prove the value in the reusability of orbital-class rockets. Since the start of 2022, SpaceX says around 90% of the last 100-plus missions have been done by flight-proven vehicles. Remember when SpaceX first announced that it intended to recover first stages? They were met with many naysayers, with either it will never work or they will never see the cost benefits of such an endeavor. Fast forward to mid-2023 and SpaceX is leading the space launch industry with the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch vehicles, and now competing launch companies are beginning to take the same approach. However, they have quite a bit of catching up to do before they are even in the same league as SpaceX. The Transporter 8 mission lifted off from Space Launch Complex 4E at 2:35 p.m. Pacific Time on its way to a sun-synchronous orbit. The rideshare mission included 72 customer payloads, and many of the companies were sending a payload to space for the very first time. Some of the payloads are connected directly to the SpaceX payload adapter, and others are connected to 2 space tugs that will deploy their payloads at a later date. All 72 payloads were successfully deployed, with the last deploying just under an hour and a half after launch. Transporter 8 was SpaceX's second mission in about 14 hours. Earlier that morning, the company launched 52 of its Starlink internet satellites to orbit from Florida's Cape Canaveral. Space Force Station. It's quite amazing when you realize that SpaceX has regularly reused its Falcon 9 booster rockets for many years so far. The reuse counts of 8 to 10 times are now fairly routine. Indeed, some boosters have now flown 13 to 15 times. William Gerstenmayer, VP and Build and Flight Reusability at SpaceX, now says that booster refurbishing is taking place to extend the life of a typical booster to a 20-flight schedule. In the past, SpaceX's CEO Elon Musk has said his aim was to see the boosters reused up to 100 times. Gerstenmayer, who was formerly with NASA as its chief of human spaceflight, joined SpaceX back in February of 2020. In a press briefing ahead of the recent SpaceX X-2 mission, Gerstenmayer told journalists that SpaceX is in the process of certifying Falcon 9 boosters for up to 20 flights on its own Starlink broadband satellite missions. After all, Elon has said in the past he hopes these landings become so routine that they become boring. And although I'm personally not quite to that point yet, it is getting close. Starship might have a rocky start, but there have been many people who gave their critique on it and said that it will never work. Those same critics have been around the whole time, constantly saying SpaceX won't be able to do anything. And of course, they'll be proven wrong over and over again. If you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up, and subscribe. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. By the way, are you familiar Ipa-toktok Philippines app? Ipa-toktok is a delivery service app designed to connect more people by delivering items door to door. For more information, download the Ipa-toktok app, here down below.